Thank you so much for tuning in to the 2022 School Board Candidate Forum hosted by Teaching for the Culture. We are so excited that you are here. It is important that you are intentional with your ballot and the candidates running for school board. Our children deserve the best, and it is your duty to vote for the best candidate. This forum is designed to help you learn more about each candidate so that you can make an informed decision on who to vote for. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Towards the end of the event, you will have an opportunity to answer the following question. If the election was today, who are you voting for? The results will be shared at the end of tonight's broadcast. Please visit our website at www.teachingfortheculture.com to learn more about the events we are hosting and learn more about our mission. Thank you for your support. Well, good evening, everyone. Yes. Well, welcome to the 2022 Pasco School Board Candidate Forum hosted by Teaching for the Culture. And I just want to give a disclaimer, just because there have been a lot of candidates within the past 24 hours that have sent an email to say that they've had a conflict and there's a lot of things going on. So what we have done is sent them a link for them to complete for our write-up that we will be publishing for the voters that want to pick their school board members. They have a write-up on each school board member, but we do have some school board members that are here and present, and I would like to definitely get started with the show. But before we do that, let's go ahead and read what we have today. Teaching for the Culture Candidate Forum follows the nonpartisan, unbiased, and impartial format. Time limits for all comments will be strictly enforced. In fairness to all candidates in the audience, we ask that these time limits be respected. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for opening remarks to introduce themselves. The moderator, that's me, will then ask questions submitted by the community. So that we can address as many questions as possible in the time available, each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question. Candidates will have 2 minutes for closing statement if time permits. In fairness to all candidates, we will rotate the order of how these questions are answered. So let's go ahead and get started for District 1. And we're going to start with James.
Good afternoon, good evening. I want to thank the Teaching for Culture for this opportunity to speak, and Ms. Bianca Goolsby for moderating this event. As I said, my name is James Washington, and I am a public school teacher. I have been so for 27 years, and tomorrow I will check in for my beginning of my 28th year and my 17th year here in Pasco County. I have lived and grown up in this district, in this county, since I was a child, attending all of the academic courses from kindergarten through my master's degree within the borders of this county. I am the son of a school teacher who is now retired from Pasco County system, as well as a member of a family of teachers that goes back 8, 9 different people in my family. I am for cultural acceptance. I am for passionate teaching. My background is in English, but most recently I've been teaching as a graduation enhancement coach at the local high school that is represented by District 1, which I am running for. What you'll hear tonight are 2 distinct platforms, and I hope that is very clear. And once again, I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. And let me go ahead and remove the timer here. All right. And then Stephen.
Hi there. My name is Steve Meisman. I'm really pleased to have been invited to this. It's definitely not familiar territory for me. It's something that's important to me, though. But my history is I was born in California. We moved over to Florida when I was young. I've been going to public school my whole life. I graduated with Jimmy, actually, in '91 from Gulf High School. And I've lived in Pasco County almost my entire adult life. My wife and I have an aerospace manufacturing business. Um, I'm a self-taught manufacturing engineer. Um, we manufacture composite parts for defense and commercial aircraft. And we've done well, and we're happy. We've really enjoyed it. I've never been to the university though, not as a student at least. I'm self-taught. I'm just a curious person, and I'm never seem to be satisfied with what I know. I always think there's something else I need to learn. With respect to the Pasco County schools, my son and daughter have been homeschooled most of their lives. However, we put them in for the last few years, and it's been really hard on them. And they've both asked us, "Can I please go back to homeschooling?" Um, and we're actually, well, now it's here. We granted their wish the other day, and we'll be withdrawing them because it's just become too difficult. They're not learning what they're used to. It's not challenging, and it's become so divisive and unpleasant that they don't want to go back. So, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much. And so those are the candidates for District 1, and we have candidates in District 3 and 5 that unfortunately were unable to come. And so again, we will send them the link so that they can complete that. So just thank you for that. Now we're going to go ahead and move to the first question. What do you see as the major issue facing your school district and public education? We will start with Steve.
This district has just got a lot of problems, and a lot of it has been brought on by themselves. But I'd say the first problem we've got is the teacher shortage. Kurt Browning has I think largely engineered getting rid of experienced teachers who cost more money and bringing on a bunch of young teachers who are inexperienced. Um, and this dovetails with what I think is the other problem. And I don't want to be controversial with your audience, but I don't support the woke agenda at all. And I think it's destructive to kids. And the divisiveness that happens there is something kids should never have to deal with, those pressures. But I think it creates a lot of pressures with the teachers. Um, so the teachers that don't support that, they they just leave. What's the point? Because they're not being paid well, and they're being abused by the students, and they're being abused by the parents, and they're not supported by the administration adequately. So I don't blame them. I mean, I spent 5 weeks teaching. I was fortunate to teach an engineering class for 5 weeks, and I learned so much about why teachers have some bad behavior, and I learned I don't blame them. In some cases, they need a life raft, just like the kids and the parents do also. And I don't have my timer up, so I'm not sure how much time I've got. But just give you a heads up. So that's the two biggest things, and then the money. They're not. This county is awash in money. There's plenty of money to give teachers more money, and this referendum I think is totally inadequate. They want to do $3,700, and then the teachers get to pay $300 for that, so they're effectively only getting $3,400. We're not remotely competitive with Hillsborough County or Pinellas County or Hernando County. They need to get a real raise that's merit based, but give them a pay schedule so that they can look at it and know what to expect. And it needs to be significant so that the surrounding counties can compete with us, and we can attract teachers from across the country at that point.
Thank you so much. All right, and we will move to James.
So, very similar answer. I think this is one of the points that Steve and I kind of agree on in some fashion. But for me, I'll start with the major issue that is plaguing our county. It is an umbrella term that I'll use, and that's the word respect. That covers the lack of pay and the lack of being heard at the district level that is plaguing our district. But it also comes from what's happening in Tallahassee and in the media, where teachers and schools are being shown as being failures, or that we are indoctrinating or we're doing things to students that parents don't want to have happen to them. And nothing can be further from the truth. Those things are not happening. Yes, we could be paying, and Steve mentioned things like there's a wash with money. We're not. We are revenue neutral in our county. A very wonderful presentation was made at the school board meeting 2 weeks ago by Kevin Shibley, where he talked about how the revenue comes in and then the revenue for voucher systems and private schools and costs are already out the door before they hit our bank accounts. So we don't have that money. And the fact that Hillsborough and Hernando and Polk and Pinellas can all pay their teachers and support staff more is because they've already passed the referendum that we are trying to pass now. And it's extremely important that those people who are listening to this, when you go to the polls, please turn your ballot over and look at that. I'm not going to tell you that you have to vote yes, but right now that's the main thing that's going to fund our schools. The bus driver shortage, the aids on bus drivers, all of that is going to help be helped if we can get that referendum to pass. Please do your research, but don't forget that that question is on the back. I would also say that it's the rhetoric that is being spewed by our governor and other groups that cause some of this divisiveness that we see in the schools. Teachers are burdened, overworked, and we need to have that respect brought back to the profession that we all love.
Thank you so much. And full disclaimer, I forgot to put the timer on y'all. So I just kind of allowed y'all to have equal time as best as I could for y'all to answer the question. We're going to start the next question with James. What would you want to see in the superintendent's budget to address equity and ensure all children receive an equitable education?
Well, I know in my involvement outside of the school system, we talk about human rights ordinances where we are protecting the rights of every student. And I'd like to see that being covered in our school systems as well. I know that at other debates that we've been at, people will raise this issue of this Safe Schools initiative and this 40-page document that's now a one-page document. I think we need to be enforcing that because it protects all students for just the basic rights that they deserve. We need to go beyond just the safe space sticker in windows and acknowledge the different cultures and backgrounds and philosophies and value systems that happen. And I'm not saying that we have to promote them, but we have to be accepting that not everybody approaches the situations at schools the same way. And by opening up that dialogue, we will have better and safer schools. So I'd like to see him instill that. But right now, that is something that is shared with parents through the guidance departments and meetings. But that would be something that I would think would strengthen the relationships with our families and our communities.
Thank you so much. Stephen?
Well, I think it depends on how you define equity. However, I think every kid should be respected. However, I don't think anyone should have special treatment. I don't care who you are, especially based on the way you behave or based on the way you look. It's unkind. If my parents had raised me to consider people differently based on the way they looked, well, I'd be shortchanged in the extreme. And we've gone out of our way to make sure that our kids have friends that look different than they do. So that, and we tried to say, okay, we want you to have good experiences with a Black kid or a Hispanic kid or Asian kid or whatever, so that they've got a database that they can refer back to. That oh yeah, they're sweet. Oh wow, that was quick. I'll wrap it up. I wanted them to have good experiences before they ran into kids that weren't nice, because that's going to happen no matter where you go, no matter what kids look like. But I don't support equity. I think people should have equal opportunity, and then give them the tools that they can to maximize their own capabilities.
Thank you so much. And we will go ahead and start with the next question. And I just think because of the timer, it's only two of you, that I will move it to the 2-minute timer to give you more time to answer the question. And thank y'all for the agreement there. So we're going to start with James for question 3. Share the work you've done or visits you've made to elementary, middle, and or high schools in the community you plan on serving in the past 6 months.
Did you say James? I'm sorry. I didn't hear you.
Yes, you.
Sorry. Okay. Could you repeat the question? I apologize.
Yes, so it's share the work you've done or visits you've made to elementary, middle, or high schools in the community you plan to serve in the past 6 months.
Well, visiting is not hard because I work in one of the schools right now. I am a high school teacher. As far as elementary level visits, I have been on the campus of Lucucci Elementary, which is in the northern section of our district boundaries. I have also visited some other communities where busing issues have really taken off. So they're not technically within the district that I serve as far as District 1, but they are within the district Pasco County, since this is an open seat in the sense that everybody in the county can vote. I have visited with those parents. I have literally walked the routes that their middle school students are going to have to walk in a week, where they're unsafe. There are little limited sidewalks or no sidewalks at all, or lights. As far as in the elementary school classrooms, what I see is a lot of respect happening with the teachers, and they're there working with the kids as best they can. With Lucucci specifically, the fact that they have smaller class sizes than most other elementary schools, they're able to do more of that one-on-one work and work with students. But primarily, they were able to raise their scores, which I'm not a big fan of, but that's the system that we have in place. And those parents should be very proud of the work that's happening in that school.
Thank you so much. Stephen?
So I was fortunate, like I said, to spend 5 weeks teaching an engineering class. Now that was in District 2, I think. It was Cypress Creek Middle, and it was an extraordinary experience to see those kids, and then to also meet some of the administration people. I formed a wonderful friendship with a lady there. She was an amazing person. And then I've met with a ton of parents as this campaign has gone on, and obviously our kids have their friends and their families, and we've gotten friendly, and you learn about the adverse things that happen at the schools where the parents typically feel like they just don't have any input at all, and then then you run across teachers and they're not content at all, but they don't. I haven't heard people complaining about, we only get a little time together, right? So they can't give me the litany, but their complaints are about how they're not able to enforce rules in classrooms. Now, in my district, there's a lot of Title I schools, and so that's something that I've been researching, trying to understand how we can help kids. Well, I just look back at my own childhood, which I grew up pretty poor, and we just, maybe the fact that we were all pretty poor, we all got along. It didn't matter what the kids looked like. But in that district, I'm thinking if I can implement some of these things that helped when I was a kid, and take away, like my idea here is to just take the 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and turn it into a 100-piece jigsaw puzzle that everyone can participate in. Because the Title I parents, look, they're poor, and they're generally not, they don't have a lot of authority. They don't feel like they have any power or say. These people should be listened to, and they should be reached out to also, to try and understand, why is it that you're having a tough time? And if it's a Hispanic family and they don't speak English at home, Let's help those people learn English at home. Help them to assimilate, become one of us. I'm out of time, but that's kind of my experiences locally.
Thank you. Okay, and we will move to our next question, and we will start with Stephen. The recent events in our nation have shined a spotlight on our institutions' apparent conscious and subconscious racial biases. What are some action steps as a board member to hold people accountable for their biases that directly impact teachers and students?
Well, so I guess you're talking about implicit bias, and I just don't understand what that is. This is something to me that exists to try and justify bad behavior. Um, I mean, there wasn't a lot of kids that looked differently from me when I was going to high school, but when I was in earlier grades, there was tons of kids that looked different than me, and I didn't have any bias toward them. And I think it's inappropriate to cause people to pay some price for some bias that someone else has. And it's deeply insulting to presume that I have a bias because it just doesn't exist. Okay. But we all might have a bias that's based on personal experience. And if you've been treated poorly by someone that looks differently than you, okay, that's just one person. If you've been treated poorly by a lot of people that look this certain way, well, you've got your own life experience there, and just do your best to try not to let it affect you and make you miserable. Um, I know that the county has spent an enormous amount of money trying to convince their administrative staff that they have implicit bias, and I've seen the paperwork. I've seen their admissions that they've said, "Oh, I went to this workshop that the county paid a ton of money for, oh, in some other state, and I learned that I had bias." Well, when my son's ninth grade English honors teacher goes to him and says to him and his buddy in the middle of a full classroom and says, "You're a racist because you're white. You can't do anything about it because you don't know about it because you're white, and you can't do anything about it because you're white." Who is supposed to? How does that advance anything? That's that it just is. It's bewildering to me. And as I go through and I see when I was teaching, I ran across I had several black students and they were so precious, every one of them. And the one kid that gave me the hardest time, we ended up bonding in the end at the end of that 5 weeks. Um, but the thing that struck me the most was the distrust. Look, I'm a pretty big guy. I'm a large white guy, German, Aryan, whatever you want to say. And he had a lot of distrust for me, and most of the black kids did. And it took a long
Your
time
time's up.
to earn that back. Okay, I'll try to expound on that later.
Thank you so much. All right, James.
So I want to start with actually a comment that was broadcast last night at a forum that I wasn't actually in attendance, but you can find the clip online, where Steve and another group of individuals who are running for school board decided to talk about needing people to assimilate. We are not respecting the differences across the board. And we really need to step forward and acknowledge that there are implicit, explicit, hidden biases in every one of them. And yes, Steve is sort of right in the sense that many cases these have something to do with an experience that we have, but in many cases they're not experiences. They're experiences that have been traditions that have been handed down. But your question also asks about what steps should we take. I will tell you that in our county over the last year or two, we have been instituting what we call social emotional learning, culture learning trainings. They're typically on our half days, but they get sprinkled in when we have teacher work days as well. And they're just ways to look at how other people's lives have been affected that maybe we haven't. And I'll give an example very quickly. This happened about 3 or 4 years ago when I was still at Gulf High School, where we talked about what it's like possibly for some of our Title I students. And you have a group of adults sitting around tables sort of talking very casually about some of the experiences that may happen to our students. And one of them was having to go into a pawn store to get money to buy groceries that week. And we have grown adults who worked in that Title I school for years who looked around the room and say, what's a pawn store? And these are the kinds of things that they don't affect our teaching per se, but they definitely distract or take away from the environment that we are creating in our rooms and that bonding that we're having with the students. So as a school board, I completely support those kinds of trainings that just allow us to have those conversations.
Thank you so much. And we will move to the next question, and we will start with James. What is your vision for education for the community you hope to serve, and how do you expect to be accountable for moving the district toward that vision?
Well, you'll hear, or people who have followed my campaign so far, and as we get into these last 3 or 4 weeks that we have left before the election, one of the big terms that I will use is that we need to return to community schools. Steve has mentioned several times that we grew up in the same neighborhoods and we went to the same high school, and there was a community feel to that school. Those of you who've ever been to Zephyr Hills High School, especially for a football game, that atmosphere is something that we need to be able to bring to every school. I've mentioned Lakuchi a couple of times. It's a community school. The people in that area fight for that school. They fight because it's where their kids and their grandkids and their ancestors have gone for generations. So that would be something I would want to fight for, but that community school label means more than just the feel. We need to return the technical and the vocational and the certification classes to those schools. We have a problem here in Pasco County where we create these central hubs where we have a brand new school called Kirkland Ranch, state-of-the-art, gorgeous campus. But what we're asking students to do is leave their community schools to attend that one. And then those extracurricular activities that will eventually be brought on board will be more difficult for those kids who are being bused over to those sites. Not to mention, our regular community schools are losing out on those opportunities because those programs are moving away from where they can be. Last part of your question asks, how will I be judged? Well, I think I'll be judged on my record. Did I make good decisions? But specifically, did I improve the culture of our school and improve how teachers are treated?
Thank you so much, Stephen.
Can you ask it again, please? I want to make sure I understand.
Yes. The question is, what is your vision for education for the community you hope to serve, and how do you expect to be accountable for moving the district toward that vision?
Okay, so I come from aerospace, which is probably one of the most heavily regulated industries in the world, and we've done an amazing job of understanding the mission statements, measuring progress, defining what we're supposed to do, and then as we manufacture it, we meet quality goals and try to after that cut costs, right? And then we also go and we measure how does the part do in the field as it's on the aircraft, and is there issues? Then we come back, do root cause analysis, and try to understand how we can improve it. This is something that I would like to bring to Title I schools, because I look at these kids and I just remember when I was young, I was curious. I was incredibly curious. And what kid isn't interested in aircraft? I just had one of my old students come here just the other day, and her passion is aerospace. She wants to be an aerospace engineer, and we can just expose her to our little piece of it in our company. But if we can bring something that's so highly refined as the aerospace industry to these Title I schools, we can inspire a lot of kids to do that. And with Jimmy, he's dead on. We need to bring the trades back. Building these palaces, these cathedrals like Kirkland. Look, Kirkland's beautiful. And if we had tons of money left over after we took care of our teachers and whatnot, then fine, build it. And then let's have an elite institution. The problem is I don't see it being elite. And it comes at the expense of trade programs at the smaller schools. So We need to have wood shop, small engines, diesel engines, marine engines, have that available at the local schools. And if you want to do something elite, fine, do that at the Kirklands. But I would love to see the Title I schools benefit from what aerospace does so well, and we're good at training as well.
Thank you so much. And we will go ahead and move to the next question, and we will start with Steve. According to the latest FSA data, 25% of our third grade students were proficient in reading. Let me say that one more time. According to the latest FSA data, 25% of our third grade students were proficient in reading. We know that reading is the foundation of a strong formative education. What is your vision for reading instruction in Pasco County?
This is heartbreaking. I believe exactly I can't disagree with you. You're exactly right. It's funny. My son's high school buddies, and we love these boys like they're our own kids. And I'll read their text. They include me on their text. I'm not monitoring. They want me to participate. And I'm looking through and I'm seeing that, me too, right? And it's METO. Right? They're misspelling that, right? And that's like the grammar and the spelling. These are high school kids, and some of them are in honors classes. Now, Wilson, my son, he corrects his friends. They call him the grammar Nazi because he has the education, right? So as I've watched both of my kids excel with their homeschooling and classical training, and then they go into public school, they're all stars in whatever math or science or English. We had a meeting with the teachers where my daughter's sixth grade. She's a sixth grade English honors, and they tested her. And they brought us in for this test, and they slid the piece of paper across the table to us, and they were so excited. And they said, "Your sixth grade daughter is reading at an 11th grade level," and they were so happy. And I was like, my wife and I were kind of nonplussed because I'm like, well, I know the crap that they're reading. This is uninteresting, and it's very basic. How about some classics? How about something that's a little more difficult to read, like Homer or Shakespeare, which I know they do some Shakespeare, but all in all, I find the English and the reading to be inadequate. They're not teaching phonics as they should. They're teaching sight words, which is you're going to memorize 6 million words, and then the grammar that our kids learned from was a book called Rod and Staff. Both of our kids can diagram sentences. It looks like an electrical schematic. Every word, and then there's the legs and down below the sentence. So I believe what you're saying, and we need to just raise the standards, hold the kids to a higher standard.
Thank you so much. James?
So the statistic that you used was specifically about third grade, and my background is in teaching in language arts, but my master's degree is actually in reading education. So this is sort of in my wheelhouse. And what I would say is the greatest predictor of kids being able to read is having parents at home reading to them on a regular basis. And some of the things that the district has tried to initiate are these summertime readings. There was a workshop, probably the end of April, beginning of May, if I remember correctly, in our school board, where they were talking about the list of books that they were going to be sending home for parents free of charge, that they would be able to do some summertime reading to get kids caught up. My fear, and what I'm understanding from other statistics, is that what's going to be happening in our schools in the next year or two because of the COVID crisis, with isolation and people having to work more hours because they weren't working their regular jobs and working different jobs, the idea that they weren't reading to their kids has been exasperated. And we're going to need to do more at that first, second, preschool level to get kids going. The other part that I would want to talk about is, unfortunately, we do have an effort here in Pasco County. I don't know if it's an actual written rule, but it's definitely a procedure that's happening. We have students who are being socially promoted as we get into the middle school grades who don't have the reading ability. And part of the problem that's going to manifest because of that is that we have kids who are discipline issues that become problems for the high school level and middle school level because they can't read the materials that are given, because we're constantly trying to push everybody towards this career, they say, but mostly college readiness. And we just have to bite the bullet and admit that not every kid is going to be college bound. We need to have remediation. We need to have people who are dual certified like I was, so that the kids don't get pulled out of regular classes that they're good at to take a reading class that's not improving their reading.
Thank you so much. And we will move to the next question, and we will start with James. The Florida Department of Education deemed social emotional learning and culturally responsive teaching as unsolicited strategies in our state standards. What is your understanding of these terms?
Specifically, they want to remove empathy from teaching. The idea that we are not going to identify that piece, and this sort of goes back to a question that we answered previously, that's the trainings that we in Pasco County are using, the social emotional learning, which just gets us to be sort of in tuned on how other people may approach situations, so that when they approach it differently than we would do it, we don't get excited or blow it out of proportion. Our goal as teachers is to get the students to move from point one through point whatever the number is on the standard. And if the kid takes a straight line there, that's great. But if they decide to go into a meandering line, that's fine too, as long as we get them to that standard at the very end. So back to the sort of cultural relevant teaching and social emotional learning, the idea is that we want to reduce everything to binary. Yes, no, black, white, male, female. And what we have in our schools is a lot of gray and a lot of differences, multiculturalism, all of the different groups that are subgroups that are in our schools. And that kind of teaching makes people who want to think a certain way uncomfortable, when it, in fact, what it does is build a culture and a community that is absolutely necessary for learning. And I'd like to, with the couple seconds I have left, I want to tie this to sort of Maslow's theory for those people who in the community that are not big experts on that. The idea that there are some basic needs that need to be met before real learning can happen. Most of that is this idea of being accepted. If you can bond with the students, if the students feel like you're listening to them and you have your best interest in heart when you listen to them, they will eat up whatever you give them as far as teaching the standards.
Thank you so much. And we will move to Stephen.
Well, it seems to me that SEL is a bookend to CRT. And the idea that, as I came to learn, is just basically it's about teaching people to be nice. Well, I don't think the school has any business being in that business. They don't do many things well other than just teaching the instructional material. Okay, so as they branch off into all this other cultural stuff, they just do it poorly. I wouldn't trust the school system to try and reinforce any culture of any specific kind. However, I think it's destructive to our society to push everything but our unique American culture. I'm yet to see it represented in the schools, but I've seen every other bizarre thing come along that that takes away, dividing us as a country and separating us. That's where the anxiety is coming from. If my kid is sitting next to a kid of whatever minority race in a classroom and they're teaching how the America was the result of oppression, well, that's just a lie. It's not true. And we freed more people around the planet than any other society or culture has ever existed, and we did it selflessly. We didn't do it with any payment in return. And so if we have it so good here as a result of capitalism that we're inventing new problems to complain about and to try and become victims in some way, instead of putting our energies into just trying to be successful. If we could start reuniting kids and teachers and parents under our American flag and our superior culture, which is inclusive, but it should not be supplanted by these peripheral cultures. That's all.
Thank you so much. And we will move to the last question of the evening before closing statements. And we'll start with Steve. Statewide, Black children continue to be disproportionately subjected to exclusionary discipline, arrests, and harsh punishment, like being charged as adults. What policy and work as an elected official will you commit to doing in order to combat this systemic issue?
Wow. Bianca, I wish we had an hour to discuss this because I have my own opinions, but I also have a lot of questions. There's a lot I want to learn about this. But I was able to touch on a little while ago where I noticed that that a lot of the Black boys had, when I was teaching, they had distrust of white men. That was seemed like the big, especially a large one like me. And it made me very sad. I would come home and I'd talk to my wife about it, and this poor kid, I kept getting his name wrong, and it's all me. I'm just not used to that way that kid's name was said. But um, we finally, he got into trouble accidentally. He made a mistake he broke a piece of equipment, and I got him to explain what happened, and I just said, let's go talk to the powers that be here, and let's explain it to him. I said, don't worry, I'm going to look over. I'll take care of you on this. I was promptly removed from the situation by the powers that be, and I had to basically barge back into the room and stand between that kid and the administrator. And I said, look, I'll pay for it. You're not going to do this. I just finally won this kid's trust. We can really make a difference for him. And you're going to take it and just throw it on the floor and destroy it. So it really took me making a stand and making a stink about things to get this kid to get some fair treatment. And there's also a lot of thoughts I have on the school to prison pipeline thing, but gosh, if I could just, I just don't have time. But I really want to understand more, but I also really feel I've got some strong opinions on it. The net of it is, I think these kids they're being underserved because they don't see consistent, they don't, when they have bad behavior, and it doesn't matter who it is. Okay. I don't care what you look like. However, the questions about disproportionate with Black kids getting punished. The problem I see is they don't get consistency, and no matter what you are or what you do, you will be predictable. And if you're predictably unpredictable, then you're going to make it even harder for the kid. And I think that's what these kids are experiencing and why they're having a lot of hard time.
Thank you so much. And we will move to James.
So I'm going to steal a word that Steve just used, and that's the idea of consistency. And in our school district, one of the things that we've done consistently poorly is putting our students in the proper places. And what I mean by that is all too often, and this has been sort of the last maybe dozen years or so, we weren't identifying our minority populations for IB, honors level courses. And we've had to go around and really look at how we were placing those kids in those programs so that we could get them to stretch their mind and their talents a little bit more. And the reason I'm starting with that point is because if you put a kid who's a brilliant mind in what we would consider to be a low-level course, they're going to get into trouble. And consistently, we were setting these kids, in lots of them, up for failure. The other issue that's at the heart of this, and unfortunately, I was in the area where this was happening. When I was working at Gulf, there was this sort of not just prison to pipeline, but this school to prison pipeline that was happening, that we were identifying students, and this was documented. There are articles, you can research this on your own, where the Pasco County school system was giving information to the local sheriff's office to pre-police students. And they were looking at data like who was coming from a single family home and who was getting written for a detention or who was constantly tardy. And those indicators consistently hit our minority populations. So again, they were being targeted across the board. It happens frequently where our minority students complain about feeling harassed and pressure, and we've got to step up and say enough is enough. We need to reach out to those communities and see where we can be the bridge between what they're feeling and what they're experiencing and the changes that are necessary in our county. And we've got to stop sharing that information, and we've got to place kids in the right levels and in the right programs so that they are not the discipline problems that they're becoming.
Thank you so much. And I just want to give a round of applause to the candidates that are here today. So now we're going to move to closing statements. Candidates, you have 2 minutes for closing, and we will start with James.
So thank you again for everybody who's been in attendance and people who will watch this later on tape delay. What you will hear over the next 3 weeks in this campaign with the two of us are two different outlooks on what's happening in the school. In the sense, one that's more compassionate, more empathetic, more accepting, and one that wants to convert people into being just American, just under one flag. And we need to do better. The other thing that I bring to this election and this campaign is the experience level. And I closed with a very similar story to what I'm about to share. And that is, if you're in a doctor's office and you're sitting there waiting for the doctor, and you get into a conversation with another patient who's waiting their turn as well, and they start diagnosing your symptoms. They start saying, well, I had that happen, and I think you should go do this. Are you literally going to walk out of that office, saving your copay, not seeing the experienced educator or the doctor who has the education to tell you what treatments will work, and go home and try that remedy? Or are you going to pay your copay and go in and see the doctor and listen to the advice that's from a trained professional who has the experience? And I use that analogy because in this race, District 1, I am the only candidate who's actually physically been in a school system for multiple years, in multiple settings, from Title I to urban to rural to high school to middle school. I have those experiences, and I've seen the things that are happening in our schools, and we have the ways to fix them. I'm the one who's going out and meeting with the bus drivers and walking the routes with the parents. That is what we are. I'm a service first person, and everything I have done in my life is to been serving those people in my community and my schools that I've worked at. And I'd like that opportunity to continue that as serving as your school board member. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we will move to Stephen.
So Jimmy, I think I can represent myself. You don't have to put words in my mouth here. You're right. Jimmy's right that there's a real contrast here, and I don't. I've when this race all started, this other guy knowing this, he was saying there's this guy James Washington. I'm like, holy smokes, is that Jimmy? This guy I knew in high school, right? He was a funny, happy kid. And then there was the other Al Hernandez, which he's the other Republican running. But what I'm trying to do with this school board run is trying to simplify things. We can improve, okay? But right now we're not. We're regressing. As we try to drive a wedge between the shoulder blades of our country and make it more difficult for people of different races to coexist and to appreciate each other. I don't see the remedies that are coming from the things that Jimmy espouses and believes in as being anything other than destructive. I think that there's one of the things that is so important to me is racial unity, and let's bring these kids together. Stop trying to separate kids because they don't have bias. They're pure. Let them be pure. Stop turning kids into activists. That is what our county is indulging in because it's too lazy to talk to people like you, Bianca, who have a different opinion. But also we can try and talk about this because we're different, but we can also agree, or we can try to understand each other better so that we can at least create some unity. We don't have to agree, but we can have unity. That is what's more important to me, I think, than really any of this other stuff. That's why I'm so against the whole woke social justice thing. It's creating division. I don't want to walk through the streets and be hated, or to be concerned that someone might harm me because of the way I look. I want to defend anyone that needs that. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And there was a lot of questions in the comments regarding the other school board members, or candidates rather, that were running. So I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page, that we had invited all candidates to this forum on July the 6th. And there were several candidates within the past 24 to 48 hours that stated that they had a conflict. So we are requesting that you ask Al, Cynthia, Matt, Megan, and Charles to answer our form questions. They have until August 6th to submit their responses. And Teaching for the Culture will provide a write-up for their responses to prepare you for the August 23rd election. I just want to thank the candidates again for being here and showing up and answering these questions. And it's very important that you are intentional with your ballot. Thank y'all so much again. And I also want to uplift that we have a straw poll. The link is posted in the comments, that if the election was today, who would you vote for? That straw poll closes at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday. I'm going to say that again. The straw poll closes at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday. So please make sure that you answer the straw poll questions for the people that might catch this later. And for the candidates that are running that want to answer the questions or be involved, just reach out and we'll make sure that your voices are heard. Thank you again for watching, and you guys have a great night.